History Network and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. It's Sunday, November 28th, 2021. We're live. Welcome to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio. We're going to discuss the 400th year anniversary of what we have been taught is the first Thanksgiving that took place in 1621, okay, in Plymouth, Massachusetts, 1621. And more people are learning, and I posted a number of articles on November 24th, Thanksgiving Day, or November 25th, I should say, Thanksgiving Day, and dealing with the National Day of Mourning, which was first celebrated in 1970. So this is the 52nd anniversary of the National Day of Mourning. But this is also the 400th year anniversary of what we have been told was the first Thanksgiving. And we've all seen a lot of paintings of the first Thanksgiving and the Pilgrims feeding the Wampanoag Native Americans. Well, for a lot of Native Americans, they don't celebrate Thanksgiving. They have a National Day of Mourning. And this year, 2021, is the 400th year anniversary of 1621, when we were told this was the first Thanksgiving. Okay, so we're going to deal with some of that history. There was a big article from the Washington Post called "This Tribe Helped the Pilgrims Survive for Their First Thanksgiving. They Still Regret It 400 Years Later." Okay, this tribe, and it's referring to the Wampanoag, this tribe helped the Pilgrims survive for their first Thanksgiving. They still regret it 400 years later. So we're going to break down this history and separate fact from fiction, as we usually do here on the African History Network show. Okay, separate fact from fiction, and we'll talk about how Thanksgiving evolved into the celebration that it is today. All right, so we'll discuss that, and then also we'll talk a little bit about the history of Black Friday. Each year I see misinformation floating around trying to associate the origin of Black Friday to slavery. I don't know where they're getting that nonsense from. Notice when they do that, they don't cite any sources because there are none. It's just more nonsense. So we'll deal with some of the origins of Black Friday. We know Black Friday is the day after Thanksgiving, and it's usually the largest shopping day of the year. Okay, so we'll deal with Black Friday as well, and deal with some of that history and the origins of Black Friday. Then I did a special broadcast on Wednesday, November 24th, at a little past our regular time. We're normally on Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight Eastern Standard Time, and Sundays, 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. But Wednesday, because of the verdict of guilty in the McMichael Bryan murder trial of Ahmaud Arbery, we did a special broadcast on Wednesday. And it's been re-airing on my Facebook fan page, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep. So even if I'm not here on 910, or the station may be shut down because of the holidays, as it was, a lot of times I'm still broadcasting. All right, so follow me on my Facebook fan page, The African History Network, our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, Imhotep, and you can watch the video from Wednesday, November 24th, where we dealt with the verdict and we dealt with the charges, etc. So we're going to do a brief recap of that here today. And Ahmaud Arbery's mother, Wanda Cooper Jones, she talked about being thankful for the guilty verdict. We know this was a tremendous We know this was a tremendous weight on her and Ahmaud Arbery's father. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll deal with why was only one defendant in Ahmaud Arbery's killing guilty of malice murder. That was Travis McMichael. He was guilty of malice murder, where the other two defendants were not guilty of malice murder, and they were found guilty on different charges. But Travis McMichael, the one who shot Ahmaud Arbery, was guilty on all 9 counts. Okay, so we'll break that down as well. Okay, now on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's corrects wrong behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man or woman's thought, you can control the circumference of his or her actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the African History Network show. We deal with current events in history and politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Sign up for our email newsletter. Text the word Kemet, Kemet, to 22828. To sign up for our email newsletter, text the word Kemet, Kemet, to 22828. To sign up for our email newsletter, also visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can sign up for the email newsletter there as well. Okay, so we're coming up here on a break in a couple of minutes here. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. 313-778-7600. Now, Thanksgiving Day is a national holiday in the United States, and Thanksgiving Day 2021 occurred on Thursday, November 25th. In 1621, the Plymouth colonists and the Wampanoag Native American nation shared an autumn harvest feast that is acknowledged today as one of the first Thanksgiving celebrations in the colonies. It's acknowledged as one of the first Thanksgiving celebrations in the colony. And this is a famous painting here that we see every year. And we're told this was the first Thanksgiving, and we were told that the Pilgrims invited the Wampanoag Native American nation to celebrate with them and celebrate that first harvest. Okay, that's not exactly how the story went. And one of the things that I do when I teach this history is we deal with this history from the Native American perspective. So I'm going to share an article that came out a few years ago, and I deal with this each year on my show. We deal with this history from the Native American perspective, not the perspective of the colonizers. Now, for more than 2 centuries, days of Thanksgiving were celebrated by individual colonies and states for more than 2 centuries, even before 1863. Okay, it wasn't until 1863, in the middle of the Civil War, that President Abraham Lincoln proclaimed a national day, a national Thanksgiving Day, to be held each year. Okay, that wasn't until 1863, but we see it going back to the first official Thanksgiving Day was proclaimed in 1789 by George Washington during the American Revolutionary War. The Continental Congress designated one or more days of Thanksgiving a year, and in 1789, President George Washington issued the first Thanksgiving proclamation by the national government of the United States. In this proclamation, he called upon Americans to express their gratitude for the happy conclusion to the country's War of Independence and the successful ratification of the U.S. Constitution. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by. Stand by. How's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Invite your friends to tune in. Stand by. Bathroom break in 4 minutes. All right, stand by, everybody. Bathroom break in 4 minutes on commercial break. All right. We got John, Ray, Jade, Cedric, Gerald. Okay. Bathroom break in 3 minutes. Bathroom break in 2 minutes. Break in 1 minute. Stand by, everybody. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, November 28th, 2021, and we are live. Calling numbers 313-778-7600, 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. So right before the break, we started dealing with some of the real history and the origins of Thanksgiving, the National Day of Thanks, and we were talking about the Wampanoag Native American Nation, which is the Native American nation that the Pilgrims had a peace treaty with in 1621. So we're dealing with some of this history and separating fact from fiction, and we're going to deal with how what we've been told is the first Thanksgiving in this country in 1621. The way it's been told is not historically accurate, and we're going to deal with this history from the Native American perspective. Now, I encourage people to read this book here, African People and European Holidays and Mental Genocide, by Dr. Shakamusa Barashango. This is book number 1, and then you also have book number 2. Okay. Now, let me say this from the beginning. I know a lot of African Americans celebrate Thanksgiving. Okay, so I'm not attacking them for celebrating Thanksgiving. I totally understand wanting to be with family and being thankful and eating and things like this. But when we deal with, first of all, any of these European holidays that we participate in, we should at least know the history of what it is we're participating in to determine how we participate in the holiday. Number one. Number two, once you learn the real history, you may not want to celebrate at all. Doesn't mean don't get together with family, doesn't mean you're not going to eat, etc. But this whole history of Thanksgiving and the Wampanoag Nation helping helping Europeans, okay, who were known as the Pilgrims, but all the people on the Mayflower ship were not Pilgrims. There were 102 passengers on the Mayflower ship. Okay, only about 36 were Pilgrims. All of them on the Mayflower were not Pilgrims either. So we have to separate fact from fiction. Now, there's a good article here from we're gonna go to clip 1 here in just a second, Jalen. We're gonna actually, which clip is that? Not clip. I think it's gonna be clip 2. We're gonna go with first. We're gonna go to clip number 2 in just a second. Hundreds gather for day of mourning. Okay, so there was a big article from the Washington Post. Came out November 4th, 2021. This tribe helped the Pilgrims survive for the first Thanksgiving. They still regret it 400 years later. Long marginalized and misrepresented in U.S. history, the Wampanoags are bracing for the 400th anniversary of the first Pilgrim Thanksgiving in 1621. Okay, so this year is the anniversary of this. Is November. It's the anniversary of that. So, and this article is written by Dana Hedgepath. She was interviewed by Joanne Reed on the the Readout on Wednesday, November 24th. We're going to share that interview as well with you because there's a lot of history in all of this. So, if we look at this article quickly here, they talk about overlooking the chilly waters of Plymouth Bay. About 36 tourists swarmed a park ranger as he recounted the history of Plymouth Rock, the famous symbol of the arrival of the Pilgrims here 4 centuries ago. Okay, and they're in Plymouth, Massachusetts. The setting of this article is Plymouth, Massachusetts. Nearby, others waited to tour a replica of the Mayflower ship that carried the Pilgrims across. On a hilltop above stood a quiet tribute to the American Indians who helped the starving Pilgrims survive. Few people bothered to visit the statue of Osamoquin, the chief of the Wampanoag Nation, okay, whose people once numbered between 30,000 to 100,000 people, and whose land once stretched from southeastern Massachusetts to parts of Rhode Island. Okay, so today the Wampanoag own about 1/2 of 1% of the land they owned before these European colonizers arrived. Now, long marginalized and misrepresented in American history, the Wampanoags are braced for what's coming this month as the country marks the 400th anniversary of the first Thanksgiving between the Pilgrims and Indians, the Pilgrims and Native Americans. But the actual history of what happened in 1624, the actual history of what happened in 1624 bears little resemblance to what most Americans are taught in grade school, historians say. This, once again, is why the real history of this country has to be taught. Everything from 1621 to 1619 to 1526, when the Spanish were taking Africans into the territory we call South Carolina and Georgia, which was 93 years before. That's 93 years before Jamestown, Virginia. And 1513, when Juan Ponce de Leon, the Spanish conquistador, comes into Florida with an African named Juan Garrido, who was born in West Africa about 1480, to the first Americans with Africans documented evidence by Dr. David Imhotep that deals with the African presence in this land we call the United States of America, going back at least 51,700 years ago. These were the Khoisan, and there was a presence of them in South Carolina discovered by Dr. Albert Goodyear, who's an archaeologist at the University of South Carolina. There was a big discovery made in 2004, thoroughly documenting an African presence in the territory we call South Carolina, going back at least 51,700 years ago, before Native Americans even came into existence. So we have to deal with all of this history, and we have to deal with this chronology of history. So the actual history of what happened in 1621 bears little resemblance to what most Americans are taught in grade school, historians say. All right. And then we see the attack on critical race theory, which is a catch-all term, which is an attack on dealing with teaching about the history of slavery and racism and systemic racism and white supremacy, things like this, right? All this gets attacked because there's a concerted effort to keep the truth from coming out. Now, there was likely no turkey served. There were no feathered headdresses worn. And initially, there was no effort by the Pilgrims to invite the Wampanoags to the feast they made possible. Just as Native American activists have demanded the removal of Cristobal Colon, or Christopher Columbus, his anglicized name, Christopher Columbus statues, and pushed to transform Columbus Day into an acknowledgement of his brutality towards indigenous people, okay, as well as African people, because we know Columbus, first of all, as we've dealt with here on this show numerous times, because we separate fact from fiction. When we look at where Columbus went on his 4 voyages, and I teach about this in my classes on the weekend, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. When we look at where Columbus went on his 4 voyages, Columbus never came to the land we call the United States of America. Okay, Christopher Columbus never came to the land we call the United States of America. You can go to history.com, which is the official website of the History Channel, or you can look at other sources and look at where Columbus goes on his 4 voyages. He goes into the Caribbean. He goes into Puerto Rico, Honduras, and Panama. He's in the Bahamas that he calls San Salvador. He's in Hispaniola, and we know the western third of Hispaniola becomes the French colony of Saint Dominique, which becomes Haiti. Okay, he's in that area. He never comes to the land we call the United States of America. Okay, so we just have to get that straight from the beginning. Now, just as Native Americans pushed to transform the Columbus holiday into an acknowledgement of his brutality towards indigenous people, they have long objected to the popular portrayal of Thanksgiving. Now, it's also important to note that the Spanish Columbus is conquering on behalf of the Spanish crown. And in 1501, 1502, the Spanish start shipping Africans into those Spanish colonies. And then you have the Asiento de Negros of 1518, signed by King Charles V, also known as King Charles I of Spain, which was a license given to European nations and European slave traders to supply Spanish colonies with African slaves, the Asiento de Negros, okay, 1518. And this is going to accelerate the transatlantic slave trade. And the Asiento is going to come about after Right Reverend Bishop Bartholomew de las Casas appeals to the king to stop enslaving the Native Americans in the Spanish colonies, because he said the Native Americans had suffered enough, and he suggested that the Spanish enslave African people entirely, solely African people. Stop enslaving the Native Americans. They suffered enough. We need to try to save their souls and totally enslave African people. Okay, this is Bartholomew de las Casas, who traveled on voyages with Columbus, and he kept a diary. His diary was made into a couple of books. I read his books back in college. He's later going to regret that decision, but the die was already cast. You set into motion the Spanish really helped to expand the transatlantic slave trade, especially with Columbus and his 4 voyages. Even though the Portuguese were the first ones involved in the transatlantic slave trade going back to 1441, when the Spanish get involved, is really going to expand. Now, and we know the Spanish come here in 1526. Well, 1513 with Juan Ponce de Leon, the Spanish conquistador, but 1526 trying to set up a colony that was today South Carolina and Georgia. Now, for the Wampanoag Native Americans and many other American Indians, the fourth Thursday in November is considered a national day of mourning, not a day of celebration. A national day of mourning, not a day of celebration. We're coming up on a break. When we come back from the break, we'll talk about the National Day of Mourning, and we'll talk about some of what happened at the National Day of Mourning on Thursday, November 25th, 2021. Listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right. How's everybody doing? Okay, share this broadcast in social media platforms. Share this broadcast back from break in 4 minutes. Back from break in 4 minutes. Stand by. Okay. Pull this up here. Okay, who still needs to register for the online courses I teach on Saturdays and Sundays? Because I get deep into a lot of this information. The 10-week online courses I teach, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Ancient Kemet, one of the original names for Egypt. Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, understand the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, this is a 10-week online course. Next class is Sunday, December 5th, 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We get deep into this history, and I do a PowerPoint presentation. We have book references, articles, video clips. So visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. As soon as you register, you can watch the class we did last week and the previous classes. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch it anytime. Okay. Now we have a special bundle pack also where you can register for understanding the transatlantic slave trade. This is a special promotion for a few days here. Black Empowerment Friday weekend. You can register for understanding the transatlantic slave trade, and you can register for the other class I teach on Saturdays, which is Ancient Kemet, the Moors, from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. Okay, from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. All right, so we have that information also at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. And you get both classes. You can register for both classes for $100. Okay, you can register for both classes for $100. They're regularly $130 a piece. Okay, so you get them, I think it's like 73% off. In this class here, we do next class Saturday, December 4th, 12 noon to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, November 28th, 2021, and we are live. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. Be sure to visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can register for the online courses I teach on Saturdays and Sundays. On Saturday, it's from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. From the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968. And we deal with history leading up to the Civil War, starting with the Louisiana Purchase of 1803. And then we deal with the Civil War, 1861, 1865, Reconstruction era, 1865, 1877, Jim Crow era. We deal with things like Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, U.S. Supreme Court case, Williams versus Mississippi, 1898. We deal with World War I, World War II, Civil Rights Movement, Black Power Movement, Great Migration. Okay, so that class, we have a bundle pack right now where you can register for that class and Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. You can register for both classes. They're on sale for $100, but you get 30% off because of Black Empowerment Friday weekend promotion. Okay, so you get both classes for $70. Regularly, it's regularly $260. There's regularly $130 each. Visit our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. We have the information there, and we'll also post a link here so for the course bundle pack. But that's at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can also email me at AHNShow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, AHNShow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com if you have any questions. Also, if you want me to do a presentation for your group or organization for Dr. King Day, African American History Month, what have you, email me now, AHNShow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. All right, let's continue. All right. Let's continue. Okay, so right before the break, we were dealing with there's a big article from the Washington Post that deals with this tribe helped the Pilgrims survive for the first Thanksgiving. They still regret it 400 years later. This tribe helped the Pilgrims survive for the first Thanksgiving. They still regret it 400 years later. Long marginalized and misrepresented in U.S. history, the Wampanoags are bracing for the 400th anniversary of the first Pilgrim Thanksgiving in 1621. Okay, we're going to go to clip 2 here in just a second, Jalen. All right, so I pulled up this article here during the break. Now, this is from history.com. Now, this deals with the Asiento de Negros. Also, Britannica.com has some good information on this as well. The Asiento. And this is something that Dr. Malefikete Asante deals with as well. I've interviewed him twice. He's a friend of mine, chair of the Afro-American Studies Department at Temple University. Almost at Howard. That's my friend Dr. Greg Carr over at Howard University. Details of brutal first slave voyages. Okay, this is from history.com. This dealt with some new information that came out a few years ago. Okay, now this article is from March 29th, 2019, updated, originally from August 31st, 2018. It talks about King Charles I of Spain, who signed an edict allowing slave ships to travel directly from Africa to the Americas. Human cargo on transatlantic voyages spiked nearly tenfold. And in August of 1518, King Charles I authorized Spain to ship enslaved people directly from Africa to the Americas. The edict marked a new phase in the transatlantic slave trade, in which the numbers of enslaved people brought directly to the Americas without going through a European port first rose dramatically. This is what Spain did. Okay, and now keep in mind, this is after the Spanish conquer the Moors, and the Moors lose control of the last stronghold, Granada, January 2nd, 1492. This deals with the Asiento de Negros. So read this and also research the Asiento. The transatlantic slave trade didn't start in 1518, but it did increase after King Charles I authorized direct Africa to Caribbean trips that year. In the 1510s and 1520s, ships sailing from Spain to the Caribbean settlements of Puerto Rico and Hispaniola might contain as few as 1 or 2 enslaved people, or as many as 30 or 40. Quote, by the mid 1520s, we're seeing 200, sometimes as many as almost 300 captives being brought on the same slave ship from Africa, says Professor David Weed, a history professor at Michigan State University. It's difficult to trace what parts of Africa the captives on board came from at that point in time, since many were captured on the mainland and shipped to island ports off the coast before Spanish boats took them to the Americas. So read the rest of this here, but this deals with this talks about the Asiento, and also hold on. This talks about the Asiento, and Britannica.com has some good information on the Asiento as well. All right, now if we go back to this piece here from the Washington Post. Okay, so for the Wampanoag Native Americans and many other American Indians, the fourth Thursday in November is considered a national day of mourning, not a day of celebration. Because while the Wampanoags did help the Pilgrims survive, their support followed by years of slow unfolding genocide and the taking of their land. Okay, so while the Wampanoag Native American nation did help the Pilgrims survive, their support was followed by years of a slow unfolding genocide of their people and the taking of their land. Okay, I think they might want to do over on that one. I think if they had it to do all over again, or as Cher says, if she could turn back time, I think if they could turn back time, things would have turned out differently. To learn the history of the Wampanoags and what happened to them after the first Thanksgiving, a visitor has to drive 30 miles south of Plymouth to the town of Mashpee, where a modest clapboard museum sits along a two-lane road. Outside, there's a Wetu, W-E-T-U, a traditional Wampanoag house made from cedar poles and the bark of tulip poplar trees, and a mishoon, an Indian canoe. Inside the three-room house sits Mother Bear, a 71-year-old Mashpee Wampanoag woman, hand-stitching a deerskin hat. She's lived her whole life in this town and is considered one of the keepers of the Wampanoag version of the first Thanksgiving, and how the encounter turned into a centuries-long disaster for the Mashpee Wampanoag Nation, who now number about 2,800 people. The story continues to get ignored by the roughly 1.5 million annual visitors to Plymouth, Massachusetts museums and souvenir shops. The Mashpee Wampanoag Museum draws about 800 visitors a year. So the Plymouth, Massachusetts museums and souvenir shops draw about 1.5 million people per year. And they're not going to get the Native American version of what happened that first Thanksgiving. The Mashpee Wampanoag Museum draws about 800 visitors a year. Okay, so every year they have the National Day of Mourning in the Plymouth, Massachusetts area, the National Day of Mourning. And it took place, they have it on Thanksgiving Day. It took place this year as well. Let's go to clip number 2, Jalen, and see what happened.
Members of Native American tribes gathered together in Plymouth, but they're not celebrating Thanksgiving. They're mourning the mistreatment Indigenous people have faced. Here's NBC 10's Mike Manzoni.
Thank you all, everyone here.
Every year at noon on Thanksgiving.
What we need to do is, what we have been doing isn't working, and what we need to do is to decolonize, bring the land back.
Native Americans gather in Plymouth to remember their ancestors and remind people why they don't celebrate the holiday. The National Day of Mourning, now in its 52nd year, brought out more than 1,000 people. They marched from Coles Hill to nearby Plymouth Rock, which they refer to as a pebble and a tourist trap. They say it's all part of an effort to push the myth that Native Americans welcomed European settlers seeking religious freedom and shared a meal with them.
The Indians welcomed them with open arms and then conveniently faded into the background, and everyone lived happily ever after the end.
But they say that story just isn't true. And they say it erases accounts of genocide and other acts of violence against Native Americans. That's why they use this day to tell their own history.
When the Pilgrims arrived on Outer Cape Cod, by the way, not on that pebble down the hill, one of the first things the Pilgrims did was to rob Wampanoag graves at Coles Hill and steal as much of their winter provisions of corn and beans as they were able to carry.
And after leaving Plymouth Rock, they marched on to Post Office Square, where they held another rally. We're in Plymouth, like Manzoni.
All right, we'll continue this on the other side of the break. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. the Superstation and Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. Stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. Stand by. How's everybody doing? Okay, who needs to register for the online courses I teach on Saturdays and Sundays? We're gonna post a link here for the course bundle pack, so you can register for both of them for $100. But there's a promo code at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, to get 30% off. So right now, till Monday midnight, you can get 30% off of orders of $100 or more. And actually, we have the actually what I did was I discounted the that bundle pack for the 2 classes down to $70. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. the Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, November 28th, 2021, and we are live. Calling numbers 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. We have a special promotion going on right now at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Get 30% off of orders of $100 or more. Use promo code AHN30 off 2021. AHN30 off 2021. Get up to 50% off DVD lectures, digital downloads, and online courses. And we have the we have a course bundle pack. You can register for my 2 online classes, from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968, and understand the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Have a big discount going on till Monday. You get both classes. You can register for both classes for $70. We have the information at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Regular price is $260 for both classes. Okay. And as soon as you register, you can watch the classes we did last week and the week before that. We do the sessions live. All of them are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch them anytime. Even after the 10-week online course is over with, you can still watch the full course. So if you want to watch it next year, you can do that. Okay, we're going to go back to that clip here in just a second, Jalen. So right before the break, we were dealing with the National Day of Mourning and the real history of the first Thanksgiving in 1621. This is a really good article from the today.com, the Today Show. on NBC. Many Native Americans consider Thanksgiving a day of mourning. Here's how they mark the day. Many Native Americans consider Thanksgiving a day of mourning. Here's how they mark the day. And this is a this picture here is from last year, the 51st year in Memphis, in Plymouth, Massachusetts, the National Day of Mourning. But they'll have similar banners each year. This one says, "In the spirit of Metacom, National Day of Mourning, United American Indians of New England." Okay, so this clip right here that I was sharing right before the break. This is from NBC Channel 10 in Boston. NBC Channel 10 in Boston, and this deals with what happened at the National Day of Mourning on Thursday, November 25th. Let's go back to this clip, Jalen.
Members of Native American tribes got together in Plymouth, but they're not celebrating Thanksgiving. They're mourning the mistreatment Indigenous people have faced. Here's NBC 10's Mike Manzoni.
Thank you all, everyone here.
Every year at noon on Thanksgiving.
What we need to do is, what we have been doing isn't working, and what we need to do is to decolonize, bring the land back.
Native Americans gather in Plymouth to remember their ancestors and remind people why they don't celebrate the holiday. The National Day of Mourning, now in its 52nd year, brought out more than 1,000 people. They marched from Coles Hill to nearby Plymouth Rock, which they refer to as a pebble and a tourist trap. They say it's all part of an effort to push the myth that Native Americans welcomed European settlers seeking religious freedom and shared a meal with them.
The Indians welcomed them with open arms and then conveniently faded into the background, and everyone lived happily ever after, the end.
But they say that story just isn't true. And they say it erases accounts of genocide and other acts of violence against Native Americans. That's why they use this day to tell their own history.
When the Pilgrims arrived on Outer Cape Cod, by the way, not on that pebble down the hill, one of the first things the Pilgrims did was to rob Wampanoag graves at Corn Hill and steal as much of their winter provisions of corn and beans as they were able to carry.
And after leaving Plymouth Rock, they marched on to Post Office Square, where they held another rally. We're in Plymouth, like Manzoni, NBC 10 Boston.
Okay. That's from NBC 10 Boston. Check out this article here from NBC 10 Boston. Hundreds gather for Day of Mourning in Plymouth. Hundreds gather for Day of Mourning in Plymouth. The National Day of Mourning, now on its 52nd year, drew more than 1,000 people. And let's go to this here. Okay, the National Day of Mourning, now in its 52nd year, started in 1970, drew more than 1,000 people. They marched from Coles, C-O-L-E', Coles Hill, to nearby Plymouth Rock, which they refer to as a pebble and a tourist trap. A pebble and a tourist trap. Okay, so check that out. Now, also, NBC, let me see, ABC Channel 5 in Boston. The ABC affiliate in Boston also ran a story on November 25th dealing with the National Day of Mourning as well. Let's go to clip number 3, Jalen.
Like Columbus Day, many Indigenous people do not want to get rid of Thanksgiving Day. In fact, they say many Thanksgiving Day traditions are perfectly fine. But they say what the holiday stands for needs to change. There were drums and dancing on the hill overlooking the Plymouth Rock Monument. Hundreds of people came together for what they call a National Day of Mourning.
Currently, we are in a time of Indigenous resurgence, with things happening on so many different fronts.
After speeches and prayers, the group marched through the streets, led by the granddaughter of the man who founded this event in 1970.
I wanted to deliver a message, basically, that we're still here.
Keisha James says she doesn't object to people gathering, eating turkey, and giving thanks, but she doesn't want them to celebrate what she calls the Thanksgiving myth.
That the Pilgrims and Wampanoag got along, and we simply know that that's not true. The Pilgrims came and pretty much immediately started killing the Wampanoag.
Marchers also called for more attention to be paid to the cases of missing Indigenous women and the return of all land colonized in the Americas.
We're not saying give it back and get off. We're saying give it back so we can heal it, so that we can all come to some type of reconciliation.
Organizers say they are encouraged to see people of many different backgrounds taking part this year, and said the Day of Mourning is a day to be proud, that after 400 years, they and their culture still exist.
We are still here today, and I stand here in peace and in solidarity. Oh, that is all.
Now, in years past, the marchers ended by burying Plymouth Rock. That did not happen this year. Police report, no problem.
Okay, that's from ABC Channel 5 in Boston also. All right. So read the article from the Washington Post. We're going to revisit that in just a minute here. And I did a number of posts dealing with this. We posted about it on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, and also on my Instagram page, and it got a huge response. This one here from the Washington Post, which came out November 4th, 2021. This tribe helped the Pilgrims survive for their first Thanksgiving. They still regret it 400 years later. It's about the Wampanoag Nation. Okay, now if we look at this one here from in CNN, we're coming up on a break. On the other side of the break, Jayla, we're going to go to clip number 1. Okay, from Joanne Reed. National Day of Mourning turns Thanksgiving into something more honest. National Day of Mourning turns Thanksgiving into something more honest. Now, this is from November 25th, 2021, from CNN.com. And they give some background history towards the bottom of page 1 on the National Day of Mourning. Okay. Established in 1970, the National Day of Mourning turns the fourth Thursday of November into something more honest. Many indigenous people use the day not only to remember the suffering inflicted in the 1620s, but also to point out the struggles that indigenous people continue to face today in the form of, on top of so much else, violence against women and girls. They're also heavily afflicted by COVID-19, by coronavirus. Now, when we look at the origins of National Day of Mourning, we'll deal with this on the other side of the break. Listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep, right here on 910 AM Superstation, WFDF. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by. Stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. All right. Back from break in 4 minutes, everybody. Stand by, everybody. Okay, how's everybody doing today? Hopefully you had a safe weekend. We're on commercial break. Follow us on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, IMHOTEP. Back from break in 3 minutes.
I can't do or teach what it doesn't know. We have it all. 910 AM Superstation. WFDF Farmington Hills, Detroit. 910 AM Superstation, a division of Adele Media. The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producers and or the persons appearing on the program and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 910 AM Superstation or Adele Media.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation and Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, November 28th, 2021, and we are live. We're going to the phone lines in just a minute here. If you'd like this type of information, also, you can support the African History Network. $ the AHN show through Cash App. $ the AHN show through Cash App. Also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show. We're here 6 days a week, so this helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, etc. All right, let's go quickly here to the phone lines. Let's go to line one. Let's go to Leroy, line one. Leroy, thanks for holding. Tell us where you're calling from.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call. You know, I heard this about the Indians and the Native Americans. And personally, you know, I'm a descendant of slavery. So, you know, I look at, you know, what happened during slavery, where was they in? And plus, not only that,
you're a descendant of Leroy. You're a descendant of slavery, or you descendant of former slaves?
No, my family, we're the descendants of slavery. I wasn't born into slavery, but my great grandparents were.
So weren't they free from slavery?
And then,
weren't they free from slavery? Weren't they freed from slavery?
Well, no, they were free. Yeah, they were free from slavery.
Okay,
right.
so you're descendant. You're descendant of former slaves.
Right.
Okay.
And so, you know, and then when you look at Virginia, and you know, on the logo of Virginia, that's what they have is the Indians on the logo of Virginia, the state of Virginia, Commonwealth of Virginia. And I understand what they said, but at least they didn't put crack and heroin and try to kill them off with that and rap music. But you know what, man? I noticed, and I tried to call in last week. After what happened to the people that assassinated Malcolm X or were accused of that, you notice nobody apologized to the Nation of Islam for blaming that on them, for blaming the assassination of Malcolm. Not one group, not one person come out and say, "Well, we apologize," because they blamed all that on Elijah Muhammad, and that was wrong.
Yeah, some people did.
Because all the evidence, even then, you know, the word on the streets was then that Malcolm, that who paid for his trip to Miami and all of that, and that when he was going to give that speech the day he was assassinated, that you know, even then, you know, that he was going to tell what the deal was and what really happened and who was behind having him killed and all that. But it bothers me that, you know, when we look at the Indians and what happened to Malcolm and them, that nobody apologizes when it's wrong. When they get caught dead, and I mean, it's many YouTube videos, but the one YouTube video of the guy with the shotgun who actually fired the shotgun,
right,
walked out in the New York police with the shotgun hanging out of his pocket, exposed, and the police just let him go. You know, now then, see, we didn't have YouTube back in the 60s, but the word of mouth was saying, "Hey man, look here." And I'm gonna tell you something else. That where he gave the $1 for the bullet speech at the church here in Detroit.
King Solomon Baptist Church.
You know what? Yeah, the question and answer. He had a question and answer period after that speech. That's missing. So
it's missing from where?
All these things.
Wait. The question and answers part is missing from where?
You can't find it. If you can't find the question and answer period after the speech that he gave at the church, and at the time, that church was like it was a community hub.
Okay.
It was a community hub back then.
I'm
they
not
had
sure.
Golden Glove boxing and all that stuff back then at that church.
Okay.
Reverend, I think his name is Reverend Williams, or whatever his name is.
I'm not certain that you can't. I'm not
now.
certain you can't find it, but okay. There are three versions of the speech. Also, he gave the speech when he first gave the speech. That was March 29th, March 29th, 1964, in Washington Heights, New York. Then he gave it April 3rd, 64, in Cleveland, Ohio, Corey Methodist Church, and then he gave it April 4th, 64, King Solomon Baptist Church. I've heard the three different speeches. I'm not certain that that doesn't exist. So it may be a situation where, because I know there are records of it, so I'm not certain that the Q&A session doesn't exist. But okay, all right, Leroy. Thanks for calling. Keep listening. Okay, keep listening. Okay, we'll go to the next caller here in just a second. Everybody, I want people to really understand this, and we have to understand history. First of all, I've had Dr. David Imhotep on this show, I think 13, 14 times. Well, I've interviewed him 13, 14 times. I interviewed him first time before I even started on that, and I interviewed him first time back in 2011. He's the author of the book, The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence. This is this is the book that came out in 2011. His new book, because I just interviewed him October 12th on Indigenous Peoples Day. His new book just came out about 2 months ago or so, because I interviewed him October 12th as well. So that's the last time I've interviewed him. All right. It deals with the African presence in the Americas dating back at least 56,000 years ago. But the first one, that research, at least 56,000 years ago in South America, and 51,700 years ago in the territory we call South Carolina and Georgia. Okay, today, because the territory we call South Carolina and Georgia. So African people were in this land going back tens of thousands of years before Native Americans even came into existence. As I've said numerous times before, and I'm not sure. I'm not sure why people do this, but if you actually understand history, the people, when we say we're descendants of slaves, the slaves were freed in 1865. And then you look after slavery, they refer to as freedmen or former slaves or ex-slaves. Like, we look at this article right here from the Zen Education Project, November 28th, 1898. First National Convention of the Ex-Slave Mutual Relief, Bounty, and Pension Association. Okay, that meeting took place November 28th, 1898. Okay, 1898 is the same year that that Louisiana rewrote their state constitution to impose poll taxes and literacy tests, and to suppress the African American vote, things like that. That was also in 1898. 1898 is also the year that you had Williams versus Mississippi, U.S. Supreme Court case to challenge the Mississippi State Constitution of 1890 that imposed literacy tests, and the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that what's known as the Mississippi Plan of 1890 did not violate the 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, 15th Amendment of 1870. And those poll taxes and literacy tests, they were obstacles to African Americans voting. They were obstacles to the 15th Amendment, but U.S. Supreme Court upheld that in Williams versus Mississippi. But November 28th, 1898, First National Convention of the Ex-Slave Mutual Relief, Bounty, and Pension Association. The first annual convention of the National Ex-Slave Mutual Relief, Bounty, and Pension Association was held in Nashville, Tennessee, from November 28th to December 1st, 1898. The Ex-Slave Mutual Relief, Bounty, and Pension Association was founded with a dual mission to organize mutual aid for its members and to pass federal pension legislation that would compensate every formerly enslaved person. Okay, this is 1898. Now, this is a picture of Callie House. Okay, Callie House, 1898. The convention elected Callie House, a formerly enslaved woman from Tennessee, to be assistant secretary of the association. Callie House became its leader for the next 20 years. Okay. Callie House explained the political goals of the organization. She said if the government had the right to free us, she had a right to make some provision for us, and since she did not make it soon after emancipation, she ought to make it now. Okay, so to read this, there's also a book, My Face is Black is True. My Face is Black is True, Callie House and the Struggle for Ex-Slave Reparations by Mary Frances Berry. Now, when you go study this history, and you go study history during Reconstruction, U.S. Bureau of Refugees, freedmen, and abandoned lands, freedmen. Okay, when you go look at history and you go look at the writings after slavery ended, Reconstruction, and then going to the Jim Crow era, things like this, the former slaves didn't refer to themselves as slaves. They refer to themselves as ex-slaves, former slaves, freedmen, etc. So why do many of us who are some of their descendants, why do we keep trying to put them back into a status that they were freed from? Why do they were freed from slavery? If you go look at the writings, you go look at the history after 1865, you look at the history of Reconstruction, you look at the organizations that they're forming, why we keep trying to put them back into a status that they were freed from? Is it possible because we've been taught to have a slave mentality? So we keep trying to put them back into the status that they were freed from? They were referred to as freedmen, former slaves, ex-slaves. Why we keep trying to put them back into slavery? All right. We got another caller, Jalen?
No, sir.
All right. Okay. 313-778-7600 is the calling number. If you have a question or comment, 313-778-7600 is the calling number. If you have a question or comment. Okay. We're going to go to clip number 1, Jalen. Now, this article here that we've been talking about from the Washington Post, this tribe helped the Pilgrims survive for their first Thanksgiving. They still regret it 400 years later. Long marginalized and misrepresented in U.S. history, the Wampanoags are bracing for the 400th anniversary for the first Pilgrim Thanksgiving in 1621. Okay. Now, this was written by Dana Hedgepath. All right. Dana Hedgepath was interviewed by Joanne Reed on Wednesday, November 24th, and they talked about the National Day of Mourning. And Joy also spoke with the chairman of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe as well, Brian Whedon, and they talked about Thanksgiving as a day of mourning for the indigenous community. Let's go to clip number 1, Jalen.
This year marks 400 years since English Pilgrims and the Eastern Wampanoag allegedly sat down and broke bread. The meeting, now known as Thanksgiving, is an annual holiday celebrated by many Americans, but not all. Flip open any children's book about that day, and you'll read about the hard-scrabble pilgrims who landed on mostly uninhabited land, and thanks to Native Americans festooned in feathers, they survived and celebrated that feat around wild turkey and corn. Except that's not how it happened. As the Washington Post recently noted, the Wampanoag, a name that means the people of the first light, had lived on these lands as far back as 10,000 years, far longer than any American. By the time they had met the Pilgrims, their community had already been devastated by an epidemic brought to their shores by previous English settlers. So in 1620, when they watched Mayflower strangers invade their land, they thought they would try things differently. And by the spring of 1621, they made contact. In the fall of that year, the Pilgrims, who struggled through a harsh winter and learned how to plant beans and squash thanks to the Wampanoag, celebrated the success of their first harvest. They didn't think to invite the people who helped save their lives. Bet you didn't know that because they don't tell you that part in the textbooks. In fact, the Wampanoag showed up later, only after the Pilgrims fired off their muskets. Naturally, the Wampanoag heard the gunfire and thought war was afoot. Realizing that wasn't the case, they wound up sitting down with the people who would become their colonizers. For many indigenous people, Thanksgiving is not a day to be celebrated, but rather a day to be mourned. Because while we gorge ourselves on turkey and stuffing, for Native people, that day represents the start of hundreds of years of genocide, colonization, disease, and forced indoctrination of children stolen from their parents and forced to abandon their language and their culture in government-run boarding schools. With me now is Dana Hedgepeth, Washington Post reporter.
All right, we're going to change this to the other side of the break. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation. Michael Imhotep. Calling number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by. Okay. Squanto was captured by Squanto was captured by the English and enslaved. He was Native American. He was captured by the English and enslaved. He was taken into England. He escapes and comes back to Massachusetts, Plymouth, Massachusetts area, the Massachusetts area, because the English were also enslaving Native Americans, and they're taking them into England. All right, stand by. Back from break in 2 minutes or 3 minutes, whatever it is. Okay, so coming up here, people of the first light. Where's the one from Indian country? Stand by. Back from break in 2 minutes. Back from break in 1 minute. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. It is Sunday, November 28th, 2021. And we're dealing with some of the history, the real history of Thanksgiving and the National Day of Mourning. We're talking about this big article from the Washington Post from November 4th. And I posted it on our Facebook fan page, the African History Network, and our YouTube channel, Michael Imhotep, on Thanksgiving Day. And a number of people were posting, D.L. Hughley and Joanne Reed and many others were posting versions of the story and memes of this article. This tribe helped the Pilgrims survive for their first Thanksgiving. They still regret it 400 years later. They still regret it 400 years later. This is about the Wampanoag Nation of Native Americans. Now, this article is written by Dana Hedgepeth, who's a writer for the Washington Post, okay? And she's a Washington Post reporter. Joanne Reed on the readout on MSNBC on Wednesday, November 24th, spoke with Dana Hedgepeth and Brian Whedon. Brian Whedon is chairman of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe, Mashpee Wampanoag Nation. And they talked about Thanksgiving as a national day of mourning. All right, let's go back to this clip, Jalen.
Their language and their culture in government-run boarding schools. With me now is Dana Hedgebeck, Washington Post reporter and member of the Halawa Saponi tribe of North Carolina, and Brian Whedon, chairman of the Mashpee Wampanoag tribe. Thank you both for being here. Really appreciate you. I want to start with you, Dana. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon. And why did you write that piece? What prompted you to do it? There have been a lot of attempts, I think, over the years to sort of reimagine and sort of rediscover what Thanksgiving ought to be. What prompted you to write this piece?
You know, it came about from a conversation with a very good editor at the Washington Post, Linda Robinson, and we were chatting. She said, "How do you celebrate Thanksgiving? I'm Native American. I'm from the Halawa Saponi tribe in North Carolina." And I sort of chuckled and said, we don't celebrate the same way you do. Thanksgiving doesn't mean to Native Americans what it does to many others in the country. And so that got us thinking, what's the best way to tell that story? And the 400th anniversary brought about a great opportunity to do that. I was very fortunate to meet Chairman Whedon through introductions and to really listen to their side of the story that, as you said, is so often not shared.
Yeah. And, you know, Chief Whedon, I think it's an excellent point, because I think there is an American tick of sort of looking at the arrival of Europeans here as just a triumph, right? A triumph of will, a triumph of the Mayflower and the Nina and the Pinta and the Santa Maria, and sort of whitewash the fact that there were people here. And then to take those people and just make them, well, those were their friends, and they gave them corn, and then everybody did Thanksgiving. And to wipe out really what was a really tragic history, including for the Wampanoag, of, you know, encountering European settlers, getting wiped out by disease, maybe smallpox or whatever germs they were carrying, and then encountering them again, and then being colonized. How do the Wampanoag look at Thanksgiving, and what would you be doing on that day?
I think first and foremost, it's important to understand that the Wampanoag people have always been welcoming. One of the reasons why we didn't wipe out the English was because they brought their women and children. We never brought our women and children to fight into battle, so we thought that they had come in peace. It's kind of, ignorant bliss on our side, I guess, and we were, more welcoming and, taught them how to grow their corn and their crops and to stay here. We've always been welcoming people, and we still are welcoming people. It hasn't really worked to our advantage over the past 400 years. We're now witnessing another pandemic here in the nation with COVID. So all the diseases that come through, we're still having diseases in these provinces still today. I would say that, Thanksgiving is a day of mourning. The fact that our tribe only owns half of 1% of our ancestral territory, and 400 years later, we're still waiting for our fair share from the federal government and the Commonwealth, I think is pretty unacceptable.
Yeah, and I was just looking at Dana Hedgebeck, you write about the division of land and taking what had been vast lands that the Wampanoag had, dividing it up into like 60-acre chunks and defying the culture of these great people who didn't divide land that way and tax it that way. What did you discover about how life has changed for this tribe in the centuries since, and how much of that culture remains? And I'll ask both of you that question, but I'll ask you as you just finished doing this piece.
Well, they are alive and strong, as the chairman said, very welcoming people. And as Frank James, who's a very well-known Wampanoag activist, who made a very famous speech in the 1970s, who was ejected, in fact, from giving that speech publicly at the time. But perhaps the best line from his speech was, "Befriending the Pilgrims was perhaps our biggest mistake." Just if you think about that and let that resonate for a moment, it did open up a long, slow, painful process of genocide, taking of land, taxation, ownership, things that were the antithesis of the very culture that American Indians and the Wampanoags especially prided themselves in.
And Chief Whedon, you're young. I'm just looking at you're only 28 years old, so you're a young man who's growing up, both within your tribe and in your culture, but in this country. And I wonder, what do you say to people who just want to move on, who just want to do the tomahawk chop at an Atlanta Braves game, who are like, why are you making such a big deal out of that? Why can't we just do Thanksgiving the way we want to? Including some younger people who don't want to deal with this history and especially don't want to deal with anything like reparations.
I think it boils down to this nation. I mean, look at all the monuments and all these people that we, classify as heroes in our founding fathers. When you actually look into the history of what these people did, President Lincoln was one of the ones who had one of the biggest massacres, of Native Americans in his time. And he wanted to bring the nation together, so he decided to make this a holiday. I think that the country and the nation has played their part. And we don't do a good job at putting out the accurate information. It's very one-sided. And that's why we're here today, to put our story out there so that we can bring awareness to this issue. I think that it's ignorance on a lot of parts. But as young people, I believe that it's our generation that will make that change and start uniting our nation.
Dana Hedgepeth, thank you for writing this very important piece. Hopefully everyone will read it. Brian Whedon, Chief Brian Whedon, Chairman Brian Whedon, more accurately, thank you very much. Really appreciate you for being here. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, so that was from Joanne Reed's show, the readout on MSNBC. That is from Wednesday, November 24th, 2021. Right at the end, they mentioned President Lincoln and the execution of Sioux Native Americans on the day after Christmas, December 26, 1862, during the Civil War. Associated Press has this article from December 31st, 2018. Lincoln ordered execution of dozens of Sioux warriors, commuted sentences of others. Okay, this is what he's talking about. So if we look quickly at this, and we're coming up here on the break, we'll go back to the phone lines on the other side of the break. So the claim is on social media posts circulating recently stated, quote, on this day, December 26, 1862, 38 Native Americans are executed in the U.S.'s largest mass hanging. The execution was ordered by Abraham Lincoln, President Abraham Lincoln, during the Civil War, which is 1861, 1865. So this is true, and there's numerous sources on this, numerous information you can research on this. 38 Native Americans were hanged on December 26, 1862, as ordered by he was then President Abraham Lincoln. They say former President Abraham Lincoln, but he was president at the time, Abraham Lincoln, after the 1862 Dakota War, which was also known as the Sioux Uprising of 1862. The sentences of 265 others were commuted. Okay, so here's what happened. A military commission sentenced 303 Sioux Native American fighters to be executed after deadly fights white settlers and soldiers had with Indians, Native Americans, angry about the loss of their homeland and lack of access to food. Harold Holzer, Holzer, author of several books on Abraham Lincoln, told the Associated Press in a telephone interview that Lincoln reviewed, quote, every one of these capital cases, end quote. Now, according to reporting by the Associated Press, the original trials were a farce, some taking as little as 5 minutes. In addition, the Native Americans were denied counsel, denied attorneys, and did not understand what was being said. After the review, President Abraham Lincoln decided there was evidence that 39 Sioux Indians were guilty of murder or rape during the uprising and ordered their execution. The remaining 264 sentences were commuted. In addition, one of those sentenced to be executed received a reprieve before the December 26, 1862 hanging of 38 Sioux warriors. Lincoln went against the advice of fellow Republicans in Minnesota, who warned that showing mercy would, quote, carry a large political cost. Showing mercy would, quote, carry a large political cost, and that, quote, lessons needed to be taught, end quote, according to Holzer. All right. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, the Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. How's everybody doing? Share this broadcast on your social media platforms. Stand by. Back from break in 4 minutes. Okay, who still needs to register for the online courses I teach on Saturdays and Sundays? We have the information at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Right now, you can register for both classes, Understand the Transatlantic Slave Trade and from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power. We have a bundle pack that discounted. You can register for both classes for only $70. Okay, normally the discounted price is $80 each. The regular $130 each, but we have a special discount. Ends Monday midnight. You can register for both courses for $70. It's actually $70. As soon as you register, you can start watching the content. You can watch last week's class, and you'll be ready for classes coming up this weekend. So we just posted the link there. We also have the Kwanzaa shop at our website, Kwanzaa shop. You get your kanaras, candle holders, mats, flags, and more. Okay, the KwanzaaShop.com, the KwanzaaShop.com. We have that right on the homepage of our website. Stand by. Okay. Back from break in 2 minutes. Break in 1 minute. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, the Future Radio. All right, calling number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. So right before the break, we were dealing with the real history of Thanksgiving and what actually happened at what we've been told was the first Thanksgiving in 1621. And we've been dealing with the National Day of Mourning also. Many Native Americans look at, and some African Americans, I'm one of them, look at Thanksgiving as a National Day of Mourning. People that understand history look at it as a National Day of Mourning. And we talked about the National Day of Mourning that took place in Plymouth, Massachusetts on Thursday, November 25th also, okay? We're going to go back to this other article from CNN in just a minute. And then there's an article that I share each year from Indian Country Today, that deals with what really happened at the first Thanksgiving. We'll look at that briefly. And this article came out originally, I think it was like 2012, 2011, 2012. So I usually talk about this each year. There's more information now dealing with the real history behind the first Thanksgiving and how what we've been told was the first Thanksgiving is inaccurate. There's more information now than there was like in 2011, 2012. Okay, let's go back to the phone lines. Let's go to Jatan. Jatan, welcome to the African History Network show. Tell us where you're calling from. Thanks for holding.
Thanks for having me, Mr. Imhotep. And thank you so much for taking my call and pronouncing my name correctly. I appreciate that.
Okay, no problem.
Calling from Baltimore, Maryland.
Oh, Baltimore. Okay.
Yeah, calling from Baltimore, Maryland. To say it's a damn shame is an understatement. You know, I grew up with the mythology of Thanksgiving. You know, they taught us in school that they even had pictures. You know, they had imagery to kind of go along with the myth.
Right.
And we sort of grew up with that. And so did most of the people I know, you know, my family and such. And it sort of morphed into a day of Thanksgiving. But I can't say I only recently heard about the day of mourning. Since 1970?
Since 1970, yes. National Day of Mourning has been taking place.
Yeah, since 1970. Wow. Wow. Nobody told us. You know, and I'm just recently learning that, you know, in the last couple of years, even the way they narrate, I guess, the, you know, quote unquote correction. You know, the ticker tape on Miss Reed's show read the Indigenous story of Thanksgiving, as if that's an alternate story. You know what I mean? As if that's not the story. As if, you know, that's not the truth of what happened. This happens to be their version of what happened. And, you know, like I said, to say it's a damn shame is an understatement. My question to you, though, is, okay, now I know, now what? You know, how do I introduce this to, you know, family members and you know, people that I know, people that I encounter? Like Miss Reed stated, you know, people don't want to hear that. They don't even want to hear about their own ancestors. They don't want to hear that. Can you just pass the potatoes out? Who made the potatoes out? Can you just pass the turkey?
Right.
I don't want to hear that.
So I think.
So how do we, you know, how do we move our community towards a more honest and authentic narrative?
Right. Okay. So the way to do that, and we got other callers too. So the way to do that, I think, is one, read these articles that I'm sharing with you, because this deals with the history, and it deals with a lot of history that we have not been taught. And it ties into Native American history. There's a really good one from Washington Post. There's another one I'm about to share that I usually share each year. And this deals with what really happened at the first Thanksgiving, the Wampanoag side of the tale. But a lot of what happened, there's similarities between the history of African people and also Native Americans as well.
Right.
And
Exactly.
when we look at books like The First Americans Were Africans, Documented Evidence by Dr. David Imhotep, and I've had him on this show a number of times. African people were here even before Native Americans came into existence. We were here in this land, and we call the United States of America even before Native Americans came into existence. So our land was taken, Native Americans' land was taken, but there's also an intermixing of African people and Native Americans as well. And some of the Africans who were here who are already here when Native American, when European settlers get here or European colonizers get here, some of those groups are going to be reclassified as Native Americans. Okay, so if you don't understand that history, you won't know what happened to those populations and deal with name changes. Okay, and then also you're going to have some Native Americans who were enslaved by the English and taken into England. Okay, that history also happens as well.
Oh, wow.
So, and one of them was Squanto. because Squanto was the one who Squanto was a Native American who showed the Pilgrims how to fish and how to grow corn and things like this. But he was a Native American who was captured in this land in the Massachusetts area by the English, taken into England, and he's going to be able to get away and come back to his people here, and he learns English. Okay, Squanto learns English.
Right.
So
right.
you're gonna have these things that happen. Also, I encourage people to read African People and European Holidays and Mental Genocide by Dr. Shakamusa Barashango.
Right.
Book 1 and book 2, because in book 1, the first thing he starts talking about is historical roots of what he calls Misgiving Day. And he talks about the Emoja Karamu, which is the Unity Feast, and for African people to replace Thanksgiving with the Unity Feast. And so, like I said, I'm not against us coming together with family and things like this on Thanksgiving Day, because a lot of people are off that day, and these are family members you may not have seen all year. And yes, we're going to eat things like this, but that's different than this whole concept of Thanksgiving, etc. And yes, we're going to be thankful when we come together. I'm not against us being thankful for what we have and we're still alive and things like that. I'm not against that either. Okay. But that's different than this whole concept of Thanksgiving, which is celebrated to basically inspired by and commemorate that first Thanksgiving that we were told took place in 1621. And then the National Day of Thanks, it becomes a national holiday in 1863, declared by President Lincoln, but it was inspired by Sarah Josepha Hale. And Sarah Josepha Hale launched a 36-year campaign to have a National Day of Thanks. And she's the woman who wrote the nursery rhyme, Mary Had a Little Lamb. That's Sarah Josepha Hale. She's known as the mother of Thanksgiving. We're going to come to that in just a minute. Okay, Jatan, keep listening, all right? Thanks for calling. Keep listening.
I sure will.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. We have Theo on the line, Jalen. We have Theo Broughton from Hood Research.
Yes, you do.
Okay.
You do.
All right, Theo, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. Two things. One, the word reparations was mentioned earlier, and there are a number of Native American that have casinos. Is that considered their reparations? And actually, give your email.
AHN Show. You can email me at AHNShow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. AHNShow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can also email me at TheAHNShow@AfricanHistoryNetwork at gmail.com. TheAHNShow@gmail.com. You can email me there.
Okay.
Yeah,
right.
casinos. You have some Native American nations that have been able to get casinos. They're nations, and they've been able to get that. You have different Native American nations. There are about 570 federally recognized tribal nations. Different nations have been able to get different things. All of them don't have casinos. And also, it's important to understand that the U.S. government has violated over 370 peace treaties as well with Native American nations also. Okay. So you have some of them that have been able to get casinos, and some of them been able to get some type of land and cash payments. All of them don't have that. And compared to what they lost, compared to what happened to them and what they lost, okay, casinos are not reparations. All right. Now it was some type of they may have been able to get some type of compensation or something like that, but compared to actually what they lost, okay, that's not that. Now now the other part of it is, you're going to have some Native American nations that own African slaves. I've dealt with that numerous times: the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, Cherokee, and Seminole Indians. But still, even when you look at that, they own about 1% of the slaves in the country. Okay. And then after slavery ends, you're going to have the Black Freedmen Indian treaties of 1866. And some of our ancestors who were enslaved by them or in those territories, like in Oklahoma, they're going to get land. They're going to get cash payments. They become members of these Native American nations. And you're going to have an effort to push many of those Africans out of the Native American nations, like in 1941, when the U.S. government conspired with what are known as the 5 civilized tribes of Native Americans to redefine what a Native American is. And they stated you have to have 1/4, 1 quantum Native American blood. Okay. Now, different now that, but at the same time, even some of those 5 civilized tribes of Native Americans, even some of them are, in bad shape. And there's been a fight to the Cherokee stripped the black freedmen around 2011 or so of their membership status, and they had to go to court and sue. Those descendants of the black freedmen sued to get their full status restored. But all the Native American nations didn't own African slaves as well. Okay. All right. We're coming up on a break. We'll hold you over for a few more minutes, Theo. Let you quickly respond. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation Future Radio. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Stand by. $5 Indians were white people. Yeah, what's going on, Jalen? Oh, I'm not sure, man. Maybe it's the internet fluctuating. I'm not. Okay. All right. Thanks. $5 Indians were white people who had their names added to the Dawes Allotment Act of 1887, which was redistributed. The Dawes Allotment Act was redistributing land between Native Americans and Black Indians. Okay. Well, we'll explain this when we come back from the break. Stand by. We'll talk about this some more tomorrow. So let me go to this piece here from Indian Country. Damn, we're gonna have time to get to the other clips. Hold on. Just the last Indian Country today. Stand by, everybody. Stand by. Got to break in 4 minutes. Okay, we've got what we can do. We'll do a quick recap of clip number 4, NBC Nightly News. Ahmaud Arbery, we'll do that. That's about 2 minutes. Clip number 4. Stand by. Bathroom break in 2 minutes. Stand by, everybody. $1619 project has some historical errors in it. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation Future Radio. I'm your host, Brother Michael Imhotep. We're going quickly back to Theo Broughton for her closing statements here because we got to move on. We're almost out of time here. Go ahead, Theo. Is your show on after mine, Theo? Is your show on next? Do we have Theo on the line? Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3.
Theo was there. Maybe she's on mute.
Okay, take your phone off mute, Theo. Okay. Get Theo straight, Jalen, and just let me know when we have her straight. We'll bring her back on for just a minute. Everybody, check out this article here from IndianCountryToday.com. IndianCountryToday.com. This is one of my favorite articles dealing with this history. Okay, and this article originally came out like about 2011, 2012. What really happened at the first Thanksgiving? the Wampanoag side of the tale. What really happened the first Thanksgiving, the Wampanoag side of the tale. Today, there are a lot more articles dealing with like the real history of Thanksgiving. This was one of the first ones. All right. And I usually deal with this one each year. So very quickly, now this was updated September 13th, 2018, originally November 23rd, 2017. But this was out even before then. Okay. From IndianCountryToday.com. This is written by Gail Curry Tonsing. All right. Now, very quickly here. They asked the question, so what really happened at the first Thanksgiving? They talk about how the way we've been told the story happened is not really what happened. Okay, so the Wampanoag Native American nation made a treaty with the people on the Mayflower, with the Europeans on the Mayflower. We made a treaty. The leader of our nation at the time, Yellow Feather Massasoit, made a treaty with John Carver, the first governor of the colony there in Plymouth, Massachusetts. They had their charter. They were still under the jurisdiction of the King of England. And at least that's what they told us. So they could not make a treaty for a boatload of people. So they made a treaty between two nations, England, the nation of England, and the Wampanoag nation, because they had to make a treaty. Because when you study this history, those Europeans stayed on the Mayflower. They stayed on the ship during the winter. They had to make a treaty before they could come out onto the land. All right. And they made a treaty with the Wampanoag nation whose land they were on. What did the treaty say? The treaty basically said we would let them be there and we would protect them against any enemies and they would protect us from ours. Okay, so it was a situation, you watch our back, we'll watch yours. The 2011 Native American $1 coin commemorates the 1621 treaty. The 1621 treaty between the Wampanoag nation and the Pilgrims of the Plymouth colony. It was basically I'll watch your back, you watch mine agreement. Later on, we collaborated on jurisdictions and creating a system that we could live together. Okay. Now, what's the mash pea version of the 1621 meal? You've probably heard the story of how Squanto assisted in their planting of the corn. So this was the first successful harvest, and they were celebrating the harvest and planning. They were celebrating the harvest and planning a day of their own Thanksgiving, and it's kind of like what some of the Arab nations do, celebrate by shooting guns in the air. So this is what was going on over at, all right, Plymouth, Massachusetts. They were shooting guns and cannons, celebrating as a celebration. They were shooting guns and cannons as a celebration. So the Native Americans, the Wampanoag, hear the shooting and they think it's a war going on. Okay, so Massasoit, the chief, gathered up 90 of his warriors and they showed up at the Plymouth colony prepared to engage because of the treaty that they had entered into with the Plymouth colonists. So they didn't know what was going on. It was a fact-finding mission. Okay, they weren't invited. They didn't know what was going on. It was a fact-finding mission. When they arrived, when the Native Americans arrived, it was explained to them through a translator that they were celebrating the harvest. So we decided to stay and make sure that that was true, because we had seen in other landings, like Captain John Smith in 1607, in the Virginia colony, even the Vikings had been here. Okay, even the Vikings had been here, and we know in North America, John Caboto, Giovanni John Cabot of 1497 goes into Canada, in the eastern portion of Canada. Okay, another European explorer or colonizer. So we wanted to make sure, so we decided to camp nearby for days. Now, during those few days, the men went out to hunt and gather food, deer, ducks, geese, and fish. There are 90 men here, and at the time, I think there are only 23 survivors of the Mayflower. So you can imagine the fear. You have armed natives who are camping nearby. They, the colonists, were always vulnerable to the new land, new creatures, even the trees. There were no such trees in England at the time. People forget that they had just landed, and this coastline looked very different from what it looks like now. And their culture, new foods. They were afraid to eat a lot of things, so they were very vulnerable, and we did protect them. Not just support them, we protected them. You can see throughout their journals that they were always nervous, and unfortunately, when they were nervous, they were very aggressive. They were always nervous, and unfortunately, when they were nervous, they were very aggressive. Okay, so the Pilgrims did not invite the Wampanoag Native Americans to sit down and eat turkey and drink some beer and things like this. That's folklore. Okay, it is just myth once again to try to distort the genocide that's going to come after that. Read this article here. It's one of my favorite articles dealing with this history. What really happened at the first Thanksgiving, the Wampanoag side of the tale, the Wampanoag side of the tale. And oftentimes we want to hear the history told by the colonizers, by the winners, okay, as opposed to by those who were the victims. All right. So read this. This is at IndianCountryToday.com. All right. Now is okay, I guess we lost Theo. Is Theo's show after mine, Jalen? Okay. Theo Broughton's show is on Sundays 11 p.m. to 1 a.m. right here on 910 a.m. Superstation WFDF. Okay. If you like this type of information, you can register for the online courses that I teach on Saturdays and Sundays, from the Civil War to the Civil Rights Movement and Black Power, 1865 to 1968, and understanding the transatlantic slave trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We have a huge discount. It's like 73% off. You can get registered for both classes right now on sale for $70. It's right at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. They're regularly $230 for both courses. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch them anytime, even after the class is over with. We just posted the link here. Register for that. As soon as you register, you can start watching. And we'll be back tomorrow. Also, you can support us, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, $ the AHN Show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN Show. Remember, those watching on Facebook and YouTube, keep watching. We'll keep going for a few more minutes. Right now, it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Peace. All right, stand by, everybody. Stand by. Okay, we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll be right back. Stand by.
Soul in Motion, celebrating 38 years in the arts. This energetic ensemble of dancers and drummers was started by percussionist Michael Friend and is led by choreographer Associate Director Pam Lassiter. Based in the Washington, D.C. area, Soul in Motion is now accepting bookings for Black History Month, Juneteenth, and summer festivals in 2022. Soul in Motion is also available for more intimate events like naming ceremonies and weddings. To find out more or to book your date, call 240-452-1349 or send an email to info@soulinmotion.org. Be sure to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Soul in Motion, celebrating our history, our culture, our future. Soul in Motion. Theater, African dance, and drumming since 1984.
Kwanzaa is coming, and the KwanzaaShop.com has all of your Kwanzaa needs. Order your Kwanzaa set today, which includes a kinara, candles, a mat, a cup, the African American flag, and a basket. Visit TheAHNShow.com, TheAHNShow.com. They have Kanara sets, which include a candle holder, candles, a mat, and a cup. Kwanzaa is December 26th through January the 1st. Add the early bird discount code for 10% off your order placed before November 28th. Visit TheAHNShop.com and place your order today. TheAHNShop.com has all of your Kwanzaa needs to celebrate this African American Pan-African holiday. TheAHNShop.com.
Black on Purpose Television Network. Yes, Black on Purpose Television Network. All black, all positive, all the time. The largest black-owned streaming television network in the world. Bringing our people together worldwide. Controlling our messages, our story, our way. Black TV the way it should be. Black music, Black history, and more. 30 plus channels, thousands of shows. Black on Purpose Television Network. Subscribe now.
Welcome back to the African History Network show. All right. If you want to advertise with the African History Network, email us at TheAHNShow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com, TheAHNShow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. That commercial for the KwanzaaShop.com. I'm the one that designed that commercial. I put that whole commercial together. So if you like that, email us at TheAHNShow@AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. Our current promotion is buy 1 month, get 2 months free. We have 2 or 3 more slots left. There's a couple more commercials I have to do. All right. So right before the break, and we posted the information here so you can register for my online courses as well. We have the information at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. You can email me about it as well. We just posted the links here. We have them discounted here, special promotion. That's going on right now for 1 or 2 more days. Okay, somebody asked a question about the $5 Indians. That deals with the Dawes Allotment Act of 1887. Okay, this is something I teach about in my online classes as well. The Dawes Allotment Act of 1887, named after Senator Henry L. Dawes, D-A-W-E-S, Senator Henry L. Dawes of Massachusetts, and it was supposed to reallocate about 138 million acres of land between Native Americans and Black Indians. Okay, the Dawes Allotment Act, and 2/3 of that land went to white people. A lot of white people learned that. So the Dawes Allotment Act was like a it's kind of like a census, and you had to get the names and locations of Native Americans to you put them on the list in the rolls in the books, and so you know who to allocate land to. And white people found out about this land giveaway, so they paid $5 to have their names added to the list. Now you had to anglicize your name to be added to the Dawes roll. You had to anglicize your name, so this allowed a lot of white people to pay $5 to have their names added so they can get some of this land. It was sponsored by Senator Henry L. Dawes. It was sponsored in several sessions of Congress by Senator Henry L. Dawes of Massachusetts, and finally enacted in February 1887. Under its terms, the president determined. Under its terms, the president. Under its terms, the president determined. Wait a second here. Okay, the president determined the suitability of the recipient and issued the grants, usually by a formula of 160 acres to each head of household and 80 acres to each unmarried adult, with the stipulation that no grantee could alienate his land for 25 years. The Native Americans who thus received land became U.S. citizens, subject to federal, state, and local laws. The original supporters of the act were genuinely interested in the welfare of the Native Americans, but there was not enough votes in Congress to pass it until it was amended to provide that any land remaining after the allotment to the Native Americans would be available for public sale. Okay, there were not enough votes in Congress to pass it until it was amended. To provide that any land remaining after the allotment to the Native Americans would be available for public sale. The combined influence of friends of the Native Americans and land speculators assured passage of the act. Now, under the Dawes Act, Native American life deteriorated in a manner not anticipated by its sponsors. The social structure of the Native American tribes was weakened. Many nomadic Native Americans were unable to adjust to an agricultural existence. Others were swindled out of their property, and life on the reservation came to be characterized by disease, filth, poverty, and despondency. The act also provided that any surplus land be made available to whites, who by 1932 acquired 2/3 of the 138 million acres of land the Native Americans had held in 1887. All right. So about the Dawes Allotment Act of 1887. There's another massive land giveaway. We're largely going to be locked out of massive land giveaways like that. Okay. I want to go to this last story here quickly. We ran out of time here. I did a special broadcast on Wednesday, November 24th, dealing with the verdict in the Michael Bryan murder trial for the murder of Ahmaud Arbery. And we talked about guilty, guilty, guilty. Okay, I want to go to this clip here from NBC Nightly News because we weren't on the air on the radio station. They had shut down for the holiday, so they're re-airing old episodes. But Wednesday night, because the verdict came out that day, I broadcasted. It was close to midnight. We broadcasted Wednesday night here on our social media platform since we weren't live on the radio. Let's go to this clip.
Is found guilty of murdering Ahmaud Arbery. The dramatic moment in the courtroom.
We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty.
All right, hold on. I want to go to, I need to cue this up. I forgot to cue it up.
Good evening. There was no self-defense, no lawful citizen's arrest, just murder. At least that's how a jury in Brunswick, Georgia apparently saw it in the death of Ahmaud Arbery. In their second day of deliberations, the jury found the three defendants guilty of chasing down and murdering the 25-year-old black man as he ran through a neighborhood. A person who fired the fatal shot, Travis McMichael, guilty on all 9 counts related to Arbery's death. His father, Gregory McMichael, and neighbor William Bryan, guilty on most of the counts. Arbery's mother, who fought to bring her son's case to justice, welcoming the verdict tonight. In the end, a case that evoked a painful history of racism amid worries of an uneven playing field was decided against 3 white men in the Deep South by a nearly all-white jury. Sam Brock is at the courthouse with the verdict and reaction.
A series of guilty verdicts that took about 10 minutes to read.
Count 1, malice murder. We, the jury, find the defendant, Travis McMichael, guilty.
Ripple through the courthouse and the crowd outside. Demonstrating justice for Ahmaud Arbery could speak to decades of discrimination.
I never thought this day would come, but God is good. Would you know him as Ahmaud? I know him as Quez. Yes. He will now rest in peace.
Yes. Brunswick, Georgia will go down in history as the place that criminal justice took a different turn.
The jury's verdict, guilty on 23 of 27 possible counts, including malice murder for the shooter Travis McMichael, who was found guilty on all counts. Felony murder, an aggravated assault for his father Gregory, who drove the truck, and the same for neighbor William Roddy Bryan, who helped pin Arbery with his vehicle and shot the video used in court. The defendants claiming from the beginning they were just protecting their community and acting in self-defense. Your client was convicted of murder. Your reaction?
We're very disappointed with the verdict, obviously, but we have to respect that verdict. That's the American way.
Do you think your client was conducting a citizen's arrest?
I'm not going to answer that question.
President Biden saying Ahmaud Arbery's killing, witnessed by the world on video, is a devastating reminder of how far we have to go in the fight for racial justice in this country, with the family now celebrating the holidays without their son. So for the cheers, relief, and hugs felt by the hundreds of supporters.
Unspeakable joy. I'm happy. I'm excited. I'm overjoyed that God heard our prayers.
There's also a painful acknowledgement that the joy comes from so much heartache.
The verdict, to me, it broke me down because I thought it could, I have 4 sons. Could have been one of my boys.
A battle for racial equality still underway, but on this evening, supporters say the scales of justice looking a little more even.
Sam, any word on when sentencing will take place?
The judge said in court today, Lester, that sentencing will be in the next several weeks. And the way that Georgia law is structured, the minimum punishment for felony murder is life behind bars, though it is up to the judge to decide whether or not to introduce the possibility of parole. Lester?
Sam Brock tonight, thank you. This evening on...
All right. Okay, so that was from NBC Night. That was from NBC Nightly News on Wednesday, November 24th. 2021. That was Sam Brock reporting, and also Lester Holt. So sentencing is going to we're awaiting sentencing, and they were, when you watch the video of what happened, they were led away in handcuffs. They're at the sheriff's jail. They were led away in handcuffs. Okay, go watch the broadcast I did on Wednesday, November 24th. Because we went through and broke everything down, broke down the charges, and what they were convicted on. I went through and broke all that down. Now, there was an article I'm trying to find also here. Ahmaud Arbery's mother, we posted the article, statements from Wanda Cooper Jones as well, about being thankful for the verdict. And we know this was, this was tremendously emotional, we know, for his mother and father to have to go through and sit in the, sit in court and see the men responsible for killing your son and all of this. You look at this piece here from CNN. Pull this up here. Okay, Ahmaud Arbery's mother expresses gratitude Thanksgiving morning, saying, quote, "We finally got justice." Okay, expressing gratitude.
Wealth is breaking
Thanksgiving
ground
morning,
on your biggest project yet.
saying, "We finally got justice."
Worth is giving the people who
All
build
right.
it a solid foundation.
Hold on.
Wealth is...
All right. The mother of Ahmaud Arbery expressed gratitude Thanksgiving morning for the guilty verdict. For the guilty verdicts of the 3 men who killed her son, calling the movement, quote unquote, bittersweet, calling the movement bittersweet. She said, "This is the second Thanksgiving that my family and I will share without Ahmaud." She said in an interview with CNN He said this in an interview with CNN. Let me kind of get that back. Page crash. Yeah. All right. He said, this is the second Thanksgiving that my family and I would share without Ahmaud. Wanda Cooper Jones told CNN during an interview on New Day on CNN. She said, but this is the first Thanksgiving that we can look at that empty chair and say, quote, we finally got justice for you, Ahmaud, end quote. Now, Wanda Cooper Jones' comments came the morning after three men, father and son Gregory and Travis McMichael, and their neighbor William Bryan Jr. were found guilty in Ahmaud Arbery's killing on multiple counts of murder, among other charges. The word guilty was a word that I wanted to hear 18 months ago, Wanda Cooper Jones said, and we finally got that word of guilty. Okay, so read this piece here from CNN. Ahmaud Arbery's mother. Ahmaud Arbery's mother expresses gratitude for gratitude Thanksgiving morning, saying we finally got justice. Now, the attorney, the defense attorney that you heard, who said he was not going to answer the question of whether his client, William Bryan, was trying to effectuate a citizen's arrest. That was Kevin Goff. That was defense attorney Kevin Goff. Mr. We don't want any more black pastors in here. And there's a federal trial coming out, federal hate crime trial coming up. Okay, so I find it, so he may not want to say anything because he can come up in the federal hate crime trial. But I find it interesting that they were making the argument in court that they were trying to perform a citizen's arrest, even though they didn't tell Ahmaud Arbery they were trying to do a citizen's arrest, and they didn't tell the police who arrived on the scene that. Okay, but here the defense attorney for William Bryan has asked that question, and he doesn't want to answer the question whether or not they were trying to perform a citizen's arrest. Okay, so all right. Well, you can go visit your client in jail now. He's awaiting his testimony, so you can go visit your client in jail. All right, that's going to do it for us here. We have to get out of here. We're here Monday through Friday, 11 p.m. to midnight, and Sundays 9 p.m. to 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, the African History Network show. If you'd like this type of information, you can support us also, $ the AHN show through Cash App, $ the AHN show through Cash App, and then also through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show, paypal.me/the AHN show, and at our website, AfricanHistoryNetwork.com. It helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, etc. This is our official Cash App account, $ the AHN show, SHOW. These other ones here are fake African History Network Cash App accounts. It's not me. You donated to those other ones. Contact Cash App, tell them to give you your money back. This is ours. Tag is $ the AHN show, SHOW. When you go to it, it says Michael and shows my picture there. These other ones here are not me. Okay, we have to get out of here. Remember, right now is correct. Wrong behavior is not over till we win. Wakanda forever. And we'll talk to you tomorrow.